So doing a lunge with the rear leg as the focus, it can be beneficial to have something to use as balance when you're doing this for the first few times. So if you want to use a stick or a pole or a squat rack or something like that, it's a bit of a strange movement when you see it, but what we're effectively trying to do is train the other quad musculature that we don't normally train with typical gym-related movements, and specifically squats. So when you do a front-legged dominant lunge, you're shortening the front of the hip musculature, and then you're shortening the gap over here. And what that does is it trains your quad musculature in a certain range of motion. But you have 4 quad muscles, and 3 of those quad muscles attach to the upper thigh bone, your femur, and 1 of them attaches directly to your pelvis, and that's called your rectus femoris, or your rec fem. And so if you were to compare this movement here, my pelvis is going back in this direction, which is shortening the distance from the front of my hip to my knee, as I am lengthening it from the distance around my knee. So there is an argument to be made that your rectus femoris doesn't change length anywhere near as much as these other 3 quad muscles when you do a traditional squat or lunge. However, we're looking at the back leg here. When we tuck the pelvis under and we keep the pelvis open, and then I'm lengthening the quad from this knee side, what I'm doing is training my rectus femoris in a long position. So I'm lengthening it the whole time. And so when I'm here, this is closer to being end range of motion for my rec fem. And as a result of that, it's a weird kind of stretch sensation towards the bottom of the movement here. And so that is what we're trying to do in this position. You will be able to lift a lot less weight doing this than you will with your front leg lunge variations. But what we're doing is more holistically training the quad tissue. And this is, to be honest, one of the biggest exercises that I put in for people who are runners, or anybody who is like a locomotive athlete, so a runner or a cyclist or a hiker or anything like that, because it really helps to protect the knee from the pain that can be associated with tight hip flexors and tight quads. So yes, if you maintain your mobility and you do regular stretching, that can help. But by adding this into your arsenal, you're strengthening your quad in a longer range of motion. And so for people who are walking and running down hills, this kind of training in a longer range of motion is really beneficial for long-term knee health. But as general rules of thumb, what we try to do is we're not really bothered about the even distribution of weight inside, outside, and heel of feet, because the front foot is mainly there for balance. So do with that what you need to. The front leg should not be the leg that is getting tired. If your front leg is getting tired, then you're not doing this correctly. This movement should 100% be limited by the fatigue in the back legs quad musculature, and you may feel it more towards the hip, but that is still the quad musculature. You're obviously not evenly distributing the weight on your feet because you're on your toes, but the reason we are doing that is because it's very difficult to get into this range of motion with a flat foot. So personally, I find the easiest way to set up, you can see I still get it wrong, is get into a normal lunge position and then put as much weight as I can towards the back foot, and then I keep lowering back towards that back foot and tuck the pelvis until I feel a bit of a stretch in my knee. And you'll see there what happened was, or the reason I need to adjust, is as I get towards the bottom, the stretch doesn't really appear, and as a result towards the bottom, I just end up shifting my weight forward. So by putting this front foot further forward, I can really get into this stretched range of motion as my knee is reaching the ground. You need to play around with exactly what foot position you need. And like I said, I suggest using a pole or a squat rack or something just for balance for the first few times doing this. And if you are choosing to increase the weight, I suggest being very modest with your weight increases for the first few weeks.